Grant, we appreciate it. Let's just start with like the 30,000-foot view of these two franchises, San Diego and Washington, tied together because of that epic generational Juan Soto trade. How do you see the state of these two clubs 2 years later?
Well, I mean, the Nationals, where I'm at here in D.C., getting ready to go over to the ballpark, are an ascending team, a rebuilding team. They're not good, and I think they'd be foolish to try to talk themselves into trying to hang around in the National League race while they're, with a handful of games of 500 and a handful of games of the wild card this year. They should sell as much as they can that's not bolted down. They've already traded reliever Hunter Harvey to Kansas City for the 39th overall pick in the draft that they just used this summer. And for the number 2 prospect in Kansas City system, now the number 6 prospect in their system, third baseman Caden Wallace. I'd expect that they're going to also trade Dylan Floro, their reliever, and their lead-on base guy, Jesse Winker, an outfielder who's had a renaissance season this year. So that's almost a certainty that those two guys get moved. Then there's some questions about their back-to-back 2-time organizational player of the year, Lane Thomas, their starting right fielder, who's more of a platoon guy, I think, on a championship team, excellent against lefties, mediocre against righties, right-handed bat. And their closer, Kyle Finnegan, is one of the top ninth-inning arms statistically in baseball this year, who was an all-star. I think both of those guys could be traded, but because they're controllable beyond this year, both are probably going to take a pretty sweet package. The Padres obviously should be buyers. I mean, they're very much in the mix. They have a legitimate chance to not only make the playoffs, but maybe be a thorn in the side of some teams if they can make a move or two when they get there. I think the National League is pretty wide open. We saw the Diamondbacks last year go on their run. Before that, the Phillies, the Nationals, among others, have made pretty crazy runs that people didn't see coming. So I think you got to try to get into the dance and without mortgaging your future, especially for a team that's invested so much over the last few years in being good at the big league level and giving up so much from the system. I think it'd be a disservice not to try when you're right there to kick the door down on one of these wild card spots.
How do you see this trade deadline playing out? Do you think predominantly going to be pitchers on the move? And do you see like a Garrett Crochet as being the top guy that could be traded here at the deadline?
Yeah, I do. I think pitching is certainly going to move more than bats. It seems like it's just pretty thin. I don't know where you guys come in on some of the available hits. I think when the dust settles, we're going to see that it was more mid-rotation type starters, maybe some relief pitching as well. You look at like shortstop, there's nothing. Paul DeYoung is maybe the most likely guy to be moved. I would say the same maybe about first base, where Andrew Vaughn, same team, Chicago White Sox, comes to mind. I think it's a possibility that Daz Chisholm from the Marlins could be on the move. That would be a big name. I mentioned Lane Thomas here in D.C. I've seen Randy Arozarena's name in Tampa Bay come up. But I think there might be a batter, too, that's high caliber, whether it's Chisholm or Luis Robert, somebody like that. I think it's really light in the infield in terms of the market. But on the pitching side, Crochet, to me, is almost a lock to get traded. I personally, if I was the Tigers, I would do what I could to try to get 4 or 5 players, Soto-esque, not going to be to the same extent, but package for Tarek Skubal. I'd be surprised if he moved, though. So yeah, I think it's mostly pitchers heavy. And I'll say this, the start of the market right now, based on the deal so far, has been a seller's market. Like I said, I can't believe the Nats got back a top 40 pick and a number 2 prospect for a non-closing reliever. So we'll see if that's an outlier trade or if that's indicative of things to come.
Interesting. Grant Paulsen is with us. He covers Major League Baseball for MLB Network Radio with us on Jon and Jim, San Diego Sports 760. The story of the Padres over the last handful of years is they often run out of starting pitching at one point. Now, that happens in baseball, but I go back to 2021. They were 18 games over 500 after the deadline. They finished under 500. They had no starting pitching. They were throwing like Vince Velasquez and Jake Arrieta the final 2 months of the year. Now, this year, they're without Joe Musgrove and Yu Darvish, but they're getting it done. They're clearly going to add starting pitching, right? And could they add multiple starters based on where they are right now with the injuries?
Yeah, I certainly would. I mean, I don't know. Again, I don't know an executive in this sport more aggressive than and willing to dance, right? Find a partner than AJ Preller. And I just think that there is a wide open tier of the league. If you want to separate the Phillies and the Dodgers, which I think you can do, that's fine. But otherwise, how many teams, and I think I said this to you guys maybe 6 weeks ago or so when they were in a different spot in the standings, how many teams are decidedly better that you would tell me with conviction that would beat the Padres in a series? Now, you guys talked about the lack of depth and some of the injuries in the rotation, which I get. But Dylan Cease has been shoving, looks like a number one. The way Michael King's thrown,
Yep.
He's putting it all together as we speak. I would go out and target somebody, Jack Flaherty type. The Orioles traded for him at this time last year. He wasn't pitching nearly as well, and he didn't have as big an impact as they would have wanted in the second half. But I think he's kind of fixed and back to where he was, a few years ago. Maybe a mid and a back end rotation type starter. If they could go make two moves like that, I think that could be the difference between what they are now and being a team that could be a really tough out in October.
AJ Preller, like you said, is always aggressive here, but one of the teams that needs starting pitching and needs some help is the Dodgers. Do you view them as like the sleeping giant here that could be uber aggressive at the trade deadline here with some moves they need to make?
Look, I never rule them out. I just have not, for what it's worth, seen or heard them linked to as many of the top end starters as you'd expect. I also think they play and swim so much in the waters of the biggest fish in free agency that I think they almost have to use their system as best they can more often than not to have reinforcements, almost like, that's a bad comp, but like the other of the LA teams that's won a recent title, the Rams, where they go with that stars and scrubs mentality, where the Dodgers are going to be reeling in every top free agent. They're going to spend huge money. Then you fill out the roster with the internal options that you call up. And so I think, could they make the move? Yes. Do I think it makes a ton of sense for them to be extremely active? Will they get a starter? Probably. But I don't worry as much about them going and getting a horse, right? I think the landing spots are the teams that feel like, that they're loaded in the system that might be a player away. Like the Orioles, to me, if they don't make a trade for a high-end starter, like if Crochet or Skubal isn't right now being talked about with Mike Elias and Chris Getz, then what is going on? What are they even? You got too many prospects who are ready at the same time that development's being stunted, and you're an arm away. Why wouldn't you try to get over the hump here and actually make a deep playoff run by going and getting an ace? And the other thing with the Orioles, in my opinion, I don't see Corbin Burns coming back next year. You saw Ken Rosenthal report on that this week. If he's gone, it's basically Grayson Rodriguez and what else in the front of that rotation next year. There is no reason why you wouldn't trade for one of those controllable aces to build the rotation around even for next season too.
Grant Paulsen with us right now, MLB Network Radio, to continue on the AJ Preller train, so to speak. Yeah, maybe, speaking of Crochet, maybe it's not a perfect fit, truthfully, in San Diego. He's thrown a lot of innings. He's never done this before. The Padres need innings, but he is under control for 25 and 26. And to your point, it's going to be a seller's market on Crochet. There's going to be multiple bids, but it is AJ Preller. So will Preller be involved, in your opinion, on Crochet at the end or not?
That feels a little rich to me, to be honest. I think they're probably like that Flaherty tier down that I'm talking about. I can't see them being in the mix. Again, I don't think it's going to be – Skubal's going to get the most.
Yep.
Crochet might be right below that. And I saw some people floating like a Soto deal. That's not what we're talking about. There was 3 postseasons of a generational talent. But I do think you're talking about, let's put a package together. It's, 3 of your top, 5 to 7 prospects probably. And if they're big league ready, maybe it's 3. If they're not, it might be 4 guys. If you're counting a couple teenagers or A-ball types, for a Crochet, multiple postseasons of a true legitimate lefty ace. I don't know that that's what they want or need to be doing. I think they more need volume. Like you said, you're finding a fit of someone that you can have pitch some innings and get you deep into some starts and maybe, just help with some durability down the stretch.
You're heading over the game tonight. You don't expect anything to happen tonight as far as scuff ups or whatever the case may be because of what happened last time, right? Like this is over with?
No, I don't. I think it's over. I not that I was alone in this. I'm not patting myself on the back, but I think we all kind of saw what was coming the night after the walk-off. The Nats were really upset, and they made it pretty clear that they didn't say they were going to do anything, but that they were, not happy. I think they set their piece, specifically Keibert Ruiz in front of the dish. I kind of liked the way they handled it, frankly, and that I'm just not a beanball guy. I think it's all stupid. I'm a big fan of celebrating, and I'll just be candid with you guys. I have no problem with celebrations. I actually endorse and love them. I thought that one violated the unwritten rule currently, which is you kind of do it in front of your own dugout with your own guys rather than right in front of the visitor's dugout. I've just never seen anybody who had a walk-off hit at first base end up in front of the third base dugout. Having said that, to hit someone is ridiculous. And I know they eventually did on that pitch on his toe. I really don't believe that was purposeful. But like the Ruiz thing, where he kind of chatted with him. I don't know if they have a relationship or not, but I thought that was the right way to do it. Like, that's very 2024. We're smarter than trying to injure people and throw at people. And I got to catch up with Profar. We didn't talk about that specifically at the All-Star break, but I mean, his smile and his infectious personality in the story, like really, really good dude. But I think that's behind them. I would be surprised if they're even thinking about it at all, that even happened. I will say it's fun. I don't know if you guys feel the same way at all in San Diego. Like that series where the Padres completely pantsed the Nationals and swept them and kind of embarrassed them in a lot of ways as they were trying to go back and forth. It did create a bit of a rivalry feeling here where based on not only the Soto deal, but then what happened, I think there was like some fun fan base to fan base animus. So people are juiced up for the series a little bit with the Nats coming in off sweeping the Reds. But the last time they were rolling, they played the Padres and their season got kind of derailed. So that's probably the extent of how much the Nats are thinking about it is, let's make sure the same thing doesn't happen this time.
Yeah, I'm kind of fascinated because, like you said, the Nats probably should sell, but it's their last stand. So, like, can they win a series and convince ownership or front office maybe not to sell? And the other thing is James Wood has never faced off against the Padres. He's just been recently recalled, former Padre top farmhand. He'll be, of course, in the lineup this week for the Nationals. Grant, we appreciate you doing it here in San Diego. Hopefully we can connect after the deadline again. And thanks for your time as always.
Yeah, my pleasure, guys. Enjoy the series.
All right, looking forward to it.